Today we heard the gospel in Matthew 18 about becoming like children. And the church, even though we just celebrated the Feast of the Apostles on July 12th, the church sort of stays in this mode of celebrating the apostles and thinking about the apostles for a few weeks, and today is one of those weeks. And it's kind of focused on the disciples asking Christ this very important question: who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And so right off the bat, this question reveals something about the apostles and their relationship with Christ. And it's one that the church wants to highlight and encourage us to pursue. It gives us insight into their hearts. And the gospel sort of preserved this nugget for us. I mean, first let's kind of evaluate the question. It's wonderful that they're asking about the heavenly kingdom. They're thinking about something eternal. They didn't ask him about the earthly kingdom and ask him about how to make money and how to become rich and powerful, but they were thinking heavenly. And they don't want to just balance the secular life and the holy life and the spiritual life. They didn't ask him about prestige or how best to raise my kids. They went right for what's important, and Jesus answered them and talked about this kingdom of God and how to get there. And so it's clear the disciples get the picture. And they don't always have this perspective. Sometimes the disciples asked him some questions that weren't so great. I mean, at one time they asked him right before the ascension, Lord, at what time are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel? But eventually they get the picture that eternity is what they should be focused on. But the more important thing is that they ask Christ this question. That means that Christ is their teacher. And it's a very important relationship, that they're disciples and he's the master. And this is the relationship of Christians with Christ. He's the master and we're the disciples. And we're all called to be disciples all the time. And they went directly to him and they asked him this question. And it teaches us that Christ is the source. And we're called to go directly to him. Every little thing that came into their hearts, they opened it up and they presented it to Christ. They were open to learning. They constantly presented their thoughts and their feelings to him. They wanted the answers and they wanted it directly from him. They wanted to hear it from his mouth. And this is essential in our spiritual lives. Our goal is not to be connected with the Bible. Our goal is to be connected with the God of the Bible, with Christ. Our goal isn't to be connected to the church. Our goal is to be connected to the God of the church. He's the head of the church. And so we always go to him to seek counsel through prayer and have him be the source of all the teaching in our lives. And so when they wanted to know who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, they just asked him, who's the greatest? And it shows that they were so direct with him. And they just asked him even silly questions. And it's clear, we know that he's the shepherd and we're the sheep. And sometimes we think of the church as a set of rules, that keep us together. We're supposed to follow these rules, and then there's this flock of sheep who just don't know what they're doing, and then we have these sheepdogs who run around and bark at us, right? That's the clergy and the servants, and they yell at us when we're doing the wrong thing. But that's not really the relationship that Christ created. He said, I'm the good shepherd and my flock knows my voice. And so that's really the relationship. We're called to listen to his voice in our lives and not just be worried about staying within the rules or following the right parameters, but be encouraged just to follow him in his voice. And when one of us gets lost, he says that I come after you directly, personally. I'm the good shepherd. I look for the lost sheep. And so one of the nice characteristics of the apostles is they asked him whatever was on their heart. It didn't bother them if the question was silly or even arrogant or presumptuous. Whatever came to mind, they asked him. And they had this very direct relationship with him. Unfortunately, as adults, we don't always do that. We don't always ask what's on our heart. We don't always reveal what's in our heart. We don't open up to people. And the more wisdom, quote unquote, we gain in the world, the less we seek from Christ. You know, when I become a man of prestige, education, honor, I have money, I don't always want to share what's in my heart. I don't always want to be seen as a child. I don't always want to expose myself and my thoughts to other people. But yet the disciples weren't like that. They weren't embarrassed to ask, you know, kind of like a child. You know, a kid just says whatever's in their hearts. You know, one time a kid walked up to me and said, you know, where did your hair go? And I love that question, right? I mean, that's what's in his heart. And he had a question, and he asked me, right? An adult wouldn't ask me that question, right? Because they know better. But a child just goes and asks. And that's what kids do, and it's wonderful. Whatever's in their hearts, they open up. Even when they're angry at you, you know, a kid will say to his dad or mom, I hate you, right? Because in that moment, they do. That's what's in their heart, and they just say it. And that's the way the apostles were with Jesus, and it's beautiful. Whatever's in their heart, whatever's on the inside comes out. And even though the question wasn't really focused on heaven, it wasn't the best question. It's who's the greatest? I mean, who asks that? Who asks who's the greatest? A child does. And the child wants to know the answer. Who's the best in the kingdom of heaven? And so the Lord picked up on this beautiful characteristic. And then he answers in such an amazing way. And he answers it in the same way that they're acting, actually. I mean, if Christ had, you know, said, if they said, who's the greatest? And Christ brought up this man with a PhD in theology, or, you know, someone with a long gray beard, someone who's very spiritual, who's lived in the desert for 30 years. You know, if he brought up Pope Tewedros and he said, you know, be like this guy, be like Pope Tewedros, you'd probably get discouraged. And you'd think, I can't be like Pope Tewedros. That's just too hard. But imagine, you know, if you bring up a small child, you know, and there's these 12 men, apostles, disciples, and you bring up this kid, and you say, be like this kid. And that's what he did. He said he called a little child to him and placed a child among them. And he said, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And the first thing I want you to note in Christ's answer is, it's very strong. You know, Christ didn't always say things that strongly. He says things like, blessed are those who do this. But this one is one of the few times where he makes it a condition. He says, unless you become like a child, you cannot enter. It's a big one. And Christ doesn't talk like that usually. And so it's clearly very important for us to listen to this particular commandment. And so the answer that he gives when he says, be like a child, it presents two very different perspectives, and they're almost contradictory. It's like a paradox. You know, is it easy or hard to be like a child? It's kind of both. And there's the paradox, right? The first thing that we learn from this answer is that entering the kingdom of heaven is simple. It's easy, right? Because even a child can do it. You know, when you're trying to teach someone how to do something, and they're like, I don't know if I can do this, you say, no, it's easy, even a child can do it. And so when you bring up a child, and you say, just be like the child, you say, I can do that. I don't need a PhD in theology, I don't need to be, you know, all these years in the I can be like a child. And so it's actually a very simple answer. Even a child can do it. And this is very encouraging. In fact, we're the ones who overcomplicate Christianity. We make it about theology and doctrine and ritual and knowledge, but it's much more simple than that. I think about the right-hand thief a lot, and I can't wait to see him in heaven and ask him what it's like that he just showed up to heaven. And I heard a nice sermon and about how the angels must have reacted to the right-hand thief. You know, he just shows up, and the angels are like, you never went to Bible study, did you? And he goes, no. You never learned any theology? The right-hand thief said, no. You didn't go to servant's prep? No. You didn't learn any hymns? You never fasted a day in your life, and yet you made it. What about the doctrine of sanctification? He says, yeah, I don't know anything about that. What about the Trinity? Yeah, I don't know anything about that either. What do you know about the nature of Christ? Was he a monophysite, a miaphysite, a diaphysite? And he says, yeah, I don't know any of those Greek words. So then the angel says, on what basis are you here? You don't know anything. And he would just say, the man on the middle cross said I could come. It's beautiful, so simple. And that's what a child would say. My dad told me I can come. So the first thing we learn about this answer is that it's very easy to enter the kingdom of heaven. But then the second thing is it's actually very hard. It's very hard to become a child after you're no longer a child. Once you become old and the world starts to harden you, and all of us get this way. It makes us bitter, it gives us pain, it gives us trauma. The world hurts us in so many ways. Sometimes we become jaded and resentful. And so in this sense, becoming a child is very, very hard to do. It takes a lot of work, and some could even say it's impossible to be like a child after you've become so jaded and hurt by the world. I don't know if I can have that simplicity anymore. I just know too much about the world. I can't have that innocence. I've heard too many things. I can't be trusting of others. I've been burned too many times by people. I can't be that loving because I've been rejected too many times. So, what does it mean to become a child? How do I do that? How do I become a child again? And the first thing I say is we have to ask God to make us into children. Becoming a child is a gift. It's a gift from God. It's something we ask for. And it's one of these heavenly characteristics. But then the second thing to becoming like a child is to start acting like one. So, as children, we annoy our parents for every little thing. Should I annoy God for every little thing? Should I rely on my parents for all my needs? Do I cry and run to my parents whenever something doesn't go my way? Yeah, I do. Should I do that with God? Should I annoy him for all my needs? Should I cry when things don't go my way? Yeah, do that. Be like a child. Run to God like a child. Why not? And that's exactly what Jesus said when they said, teach us how to pray. And he started it with, say, our Father. Start with calling him Dad, which was revolutionary at the time. That's the relationship. It's a parent-son relationship. And when Christ did that, he gave us permission to talk to him like our dad. He established a whole way of thinking, a new way of thinking, a totally different perspective. St. Faustina says, when I see that the burden is beyond my strength, I do not consider or analyze it or probe into it, but I run like a child to the heart of Jesus and say only one word to him, you can do all things. And then I keep silent because I know that Jesus himself will intervene in the matter. And as for me, instead of tormenting myself, I use that time to love him. I love that. Just run to him like a child. And this carefree attitude is the one children have. They just trust your dad. I mean, you can all imagine a time when you're young and you're walking and you're holding your dad's hand and you're just a little kid. You have no idea where you are. You have no idea where you're going. You're not even thinking. You're just walking and looking around because dad's got my hand. And you don't even worry about cars or anything else. And then all of a sudden, and I can still remember this feeling of your dad letting go of your hand. And all of a sudden, you just kind of becoming aware that, hey, I don't know where I am. I don't know where I'm going. It's an immediate fear that hits us when our Father lets go of our hands. And so now the hard part becomes, we said that becoming a child is both easy and very difficult. And the difficult part is becoming like a child again after you become an adult and you've earned all this respect, you've earned money, you've earned power, you've earned prestige, you've earned wisdom of the world. And then for someone to say, become like a child. In fact, it's dismissive to be asked to be like a child. In fact, if some of you get talked down to, you might say something like, don't talk to me like I'm a child. That's something you respond when someone doesn't give you the right dignity. And we reach this point in our jobs, at work, at church even. We demand this certain level of respect, and we don't want to give up our image, our cachet, our dignity. You may say something like, hey, don't talk to me like a child. I've been doing this a long time. I know what I'm doing. So talking to me like a child or me acting like a child is not even dignified. So this instruction to become like a child, it isn't given out of the blue or randomly. Can you think of someone else who is very old but acted very young? Can you think of someone else who was before the ages and yet became a child? Christ is saying, be like me. That's what I did. I who was above the cherubim, I who was before all time, light of light, true God of true God, begotten, not created, I became a child. And so he's telling us to be the image and likeness of him. He left heaven, he left glory, he took no reputation. He became the suffering servant with no respect, no dignity, no money, no home, no power, no honor. That's exactly what Jesus did in the incarnation. And just like a child, he gave up all of his glory, all of his dignity, all of his power, and he became so humbled. And so what's the characteristic that Christ intends for us to have? The first one that comes to mind is meekness. Because when children are told what to do, usually, they just do it. You ask them to do something and they just obey. And why is this trait so important is because God can't give us anything unless we're meek. God can't give you any grace, any virtue. Virtues are all gifts. And unless you have humility, God can't give it to you because it'll destroy you. Any grace or any virtue you're given without meekness, that virtue will destroy you. And that's why St. Peter says God opposes the proud. And so one of the things about kids is they know where stuff comes from. So if you had $100, if you had $100 in your hand and you're an adult, and I say, where'd you get the $100 from? I can tell you what my answer would be. It would be, I earned it. I worked hard, I went to school, I earned this $100. I put in my time. But if you ask a child, where'd you get the $100? They say, my dad gave it to me. It's not really mine. He just handed it to me. And they recognize that everything is from above. And so when you look to that angel up in heaven, back to our story, and they say, how'd you get in here? How'd you get into heaven? And you say, I lived a good life. I went to church. I fasted. I did all of the commandments that I'm supposed to do. I earned it. Now you've got a really big problem. Because once we go up to heaven and we say, I earned heaven, well, now you're a heretic. It's a free gift. My dad gave it to me. It's always that simple. And so we have to answer that angel in the third person. He loved me. He gave it to me. It's because he loves me. And that's why I have this $100. The man on the middle cross said I could come. And so the final characteristic I want to talk about when we think about kids is they keep running back to their parents over and over and over again. And as long as their parents forgive them, they keep coming back. I want to read you a quote from this book, Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives. It's a really great book. And he says, all of us sin constantly. We slip and fall. In reality, we fall into traps set by demons. The Holy Fathers and the saints always tell us it is important to get up immediately after a fall and to keep on walking toward God. Even if we fall 100 times a day, it does not matter. We must get up and go on walking toward God without looking back. What has happened has happened. It's in the past. Just keep on going, all the while asking for help from God. And this has to be our posture as a son that just keeps returning to his dad, because every time he comes to his dad throws his arms around him and says, welcome back. Let's kill the fatted calf and let's put a ring on his finger. And so this is the most important characteristic of the child. We have to keep coming back to our dad, getting up over and over, walking towards him all the time and never walking away. Keep the conversation going. So, to summarize today, we see what the apostles did. And in what they did, in asking him such a simple question, they acted like children. And we want to all be like children. There's a story about St. Matthew the Poor, Father Matthew the Poor, and he used to put a picture of himself when he was 4 years old, and he used to put it up in his room. And he used to always stare at that picture and say, I'm just that 4-year-old. Let us always remember we just want to be kids. We always want to run to our dad. We always want to keep that line of communication open. And we always want to be as malleable as children, seeking him in everything we do. I want to read you a prayer. It's one of my favorite prayers. It's a very simple prayer, and I hope we can say it together, because submitting our will to God in meekness is the ultimate form of prayer. And so it's called the whatever prayer. Whatever you want, Lord, I want. Whatever you choose, I choose. Whatever you say, I'll do. Whatever you give, I'll receive. Whatever you withhold, I'll accept. Whatever you plan, I rejoice in. Whatever, Lord, whatever. Can you say it with me? Whatever you want, Lord, I want. Whatever you choose, I choose. Whatever you say, I'll do. Whatever you give, I'll receive. Whatever you withhold, I'll accept. Whatever you plan, I rejoice in. Whatever, Lord, whatever. I hope that we can make this our prayer constantly as we move towards becoming like children. May the Lord grant us the docile nature of a child, one of meekness and humility, and accept our Father's will in our lives, and glory be to God forever. Amen.